In September 1599, a Swiss medical student named Thomas Platter crossed the River Thames to watch a tragedy. The venue was a newly constructed playhouse with a thatched roof, the first Globe Theatre. This map details Elizabethan London's densely packed streets. Queen Elizabeth had ruled 41 years. Aging and unmarried, she lacked an heir. Following the break with Rome, this succession crisis threatened to turn Catholic and Protestant factions against one another in a catastrophic civil war. Into this atmosphere of profound uncertainty, Shakespeare introduced the tragedy of Julius Caesar. He used the ancient Roman Republic as a coded reflection, allowing his audience to assess the fragility of their own state through a historical lens. The play acts as an urgent warning. It strips away the comfort of distance to examine the terrifying ambiguity of state power, the vulnerability of leadership, and the destructive nature of a contested succession. The standard reading of Julius Caesar frames the conflict as a straightforward battle. On one side, authoritarian tyranny; on the other, republican liberty. To simply identify Caesar as the sole villain and Brutus as the heroic patriot drastically oversimplifies the complex reality of the text. The true structural tension of the play lies in a collision. We are watching two extreme, destructive ideological apparatuses slam into one another. The first extreme is Caesarism, a charismatic populism that elevates a single leader. The academic counterconcept is Brutism, an inflexible moral idealism rooted in strict philosophical rigidity. Unchecked populist power and rigid moral fanaticism operate identically. They are mutually assured paths that guarantee the structural collapse of a republic. Shakespeare establishes a sharp divide between the man and the myth. The physical Julius Caesar presented in the opening scenes is a leader burdened by distinct human limitations. He actively seeks a cure for his wife Calphurnia's inability to produce an heir, and he explicitly mentions his deafness in one ear. He is mortal, aging, and vulnerable. This marble bust reveals the contrast. The screaming breastplate face reflects the terrifying mythic projection of the public Caesar, an entity constructed by mass adoration. Through continuous public spectacle and the careful control of rhetoric, his supporters detach him from his physical flaws. They cast him as an abstract, untouchable force. This creates Caesarism. It is an ideological and charismatic apparatus that exists completely independent of Julius Caesar the man. When a political system relies on a mythologized leader, the symbol inevitably eclipses the human reality. The state becomes inherently unstable because it binds its survival to an illusion of invincibility. To counter this threat, Marcus Brutus adopts an ideological framework that functions as a direct structural mirror to Caesarism. The Republic rests on two parallel pillars. On the right, the tenets of Brutism, philosophical idealism, stoic rigidity, and absolute moral strictness. Brutus operates on an unwavering belief in the supremacy of reason over human emotion. He demands total adherence to logic, suppressing personal affection. This strict adherence allows him to rationalize preemptive violence. He frames the assassination of his close friend not as murder, but as a necessary, logical treachery required for the general good. By strictly defining what constitutes liberty and eliminating variables of emotion or empathy, Brutus constructs a new, equally oppressive ideological tyranny. His attempt to avert a dictatorship results in moral fanaticism. Both Caesar and Brutus share a fatal behavioral flaw: profound self-righteousness. They actively and deliberately detach themselves from emotional intelligence, viewing vulnerability as a threat to the rigid public personas they have constructed. This detachment is tested when both men receive prescient warnings from their respective wives. Calphurnia describes terrifying omens foreshadowing Caesar's death, while Portia demands that Brutus share the secret burden consuming his mind. Both men instantly silence this feminine agency. They dismiss the warnings of their households, prioritizing the supposedly rational public domain over domestic insight. This shared suppression seals their mutual downfalls. Eliminating emotional insight from political calculation removes the perspective necessary to anticipate human behavior, guaranteeing systemic failure. The post-assassination funeral orations serve as the ultimate stress test for these competing ideologies. Brutus speaks to the crowd using cold geometric logic. He relies entirely on philosophical abstraction, asking the citizens to respect his honor and carefully weigh his reasoning. He makes a fatal idealistic assumption. He believes the general public processes massive political upheaval through pure logic, rather than emotion. Mark Antony delivers an adaptive oration that weaponizes Caesarism. Bypassing logic entirely, he turns the crowd into a violent vortex of grief and collective rage. The immediate consequence of Antony's emotional rhetoric is a surge of senseless violence. The mob encounters Cinna the poet, and despite his innocence, they murder him simply because he shares a name with one of the conspirators. When ideological extremes are fueled by unchecked rhetorical manipulation, logic vanishes. The society inevitably degrades into a chaotic, uncontrollable schism. The conspirators believed spilling Caesar's blood would destroy his authority and restore the Republic, but they encounter the paradox of preemptive violence. Killing the physical dictator permanently immortalizes the ideology. The mortal body is destroyed, but the abstract myth exponentially multiplies, becoming a psychological force that physically haunts Brutus as Caesar's ghost at Philippi. Physical violence against a symbol only severs the dangerous ideology from a vulnerable human body. Unrestrained by mortality, that ideology becomes an invincible force. These scattered ruins of the Roman Forum stand as a visual record that the Republic's collapse was not the fault of a single ambitious tyrant. The state was mutually destroyed by mirroring extremes. Charismatic populism and rigid moral fanaticism tore at the same foundational structures from opposite sides. The conspirators pursued political stability through betrayal and uncompromising idealism. In doing so, they produced the exact civic discord they were trying to prevent. A stable society requires a comprehensive balance between public reason and domestic emotional intelligence. When leaders eliminate that balance, any resistance to tyranny simply becomes tyranny by another name.